We were learning about certain customs of mourning that leniency is granted. Uh, we talked about bathing
and customs of mourning
as long as
as leniency is granted.
the reason for bathing
We
is
talked
not
about
for
bathing
comfort, but rather it's to
as long
alleviate, but rather is to alleviate discomfort. And then we talked yesterday, the last thing we spoke about is Ne'ilas sandal. We talked about wearing shoes, where if the whole reason for wearing shoes is to make sure that your feet don't get injured, so then that would be permissible. So we're on the bottom, towards the bottom of Chavtes Amid Aleph, the word Tane, which is a little bit more than halfway. So Tane, the Makom. Now we're going to talk about another issue, which is Shabbos. Now we know that on Shabbos we know this from because we've probably had experience with this in the past. On Shabbos, Devarim Shebetharhesia, public matters of Avelus do not apply on Shabbos, which means what does an Avel do as he goes into Shabbos? He puts on his leather shoes, he's allowed to bathe, he wears his regular untorn clothing, and everything that he does is supposed to be normal. And the Gemara at the end of this discussion today will get into the source of how we know this, that on Shabbos you're not supposed to have any overt signs of mourning. But Dvarim Shabbatzina, private matters, you're not supposed to do because you're a mourner. So the one distinctive Davar Shabbatzina is marital intimacy. You're not supposed to be intimate with your wife during your Shiva, even though it's Shabbos, because that's not something that's overt. That's something that's hidden. So what the Gemara is now going to deal with is, what about greeting the mourner on Shabbos? What about greeting the mourner on Shabbos? Are you allowed to go over to an ovel and say, "Good Shabbos, how are you?" and so forth? Or do we say, stay away from the mourner because you could call that davar shabbatzina arguably, because you could always say, "Oh, I was running towards the herring instead of wanting to wish him shalom aleichem." A lot of times I don't say good Shabbos to every single person. So do you have to dafka avoid greeting the mourner or not? So Tane, b'makom shenagu lishol avelim b'Shabbos sha'alim, that the Brisa says that in places where the custom is to greet the mourners on Shabbos, then you're permitted to greet them. Uvadarom sha'alim, and in the south, in Eretz Yisrael in the south, that is the practice. Um, so if you take a look at footnote 16, B'isurei Avelus, Yeshnam Dvarim Shehem Uchlatim Kidvarim Shebeperhesia, Ve'enam Noagim B'Shabbos. When it comes to prohibitions of Avelus, there are certain things that are clearly demarcated as public matters, and therefore they fall away on Shabbos. Ve'yeshnam Shemuchlatim Kidvarim Shebetzina B'Noagim Gam B'Shabbos. And there are things that are clearly private matters which are still extant. And that's really the Gemara's question. How do we look at greeting? And the Brisa basically answers that it all depends on the minhag of the place. The reason why this is a question, right? You're like, is it public? Is it private? Because on the one hand, it's done publicly, but at the same time, even if the avel does not greet and is not greeted, so it's not clearly recognizable that he's doing it because of his avelus. Maybe he's not greeting others because he's deeply immersed in pensive thought, or any other reason. And therefore, that's why we look at it in this way. And let's see. I want to look up the halacha. I think the halacha, the poskim say that you're not supposed to go out of your way to greet the Avel. But if it happens, like in the course, in the normal course of social interaction in a shul or whatever it is, so then it's okay.
So
But
I'm always saying Shiva, the Shiva, 7 days you're talking about.
yeah, only during Shiva. Okay, the Gemara continues. I'll try to find the halacha for you. Rabbi Hoshia Ruba Azal Lechadatar. Rav Hoshia, the great Rav Hoshia, once went to a certain place, the Chaza Avelaya B'Shukta, and he saw Avelim on Shabbos Ushaolbon, and he greeted them. So Amar Lon, he said to them, Ani Eini Yodea Minhag Mekomchem. He says, gentlemen, quite honestly, I don't know what the minhag of your makom is. Ella Shalom Aleichem Keminhag Mekomenu. But all I can say is Shalom Aleichem, because that's our minhag, that we greet the Avelim. I don't know if you're used to that or not, but I just wanted to say Shalom Aleichem. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chalafti Mishabach b'de Rabbi Meir Kumet Ziporoi. Once another story, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi was once praising the great Rabbi Meir in front of some Jews in Tzipori. Tzipori was in the north,
Yes.
and I guess they didn't know Rabbi Meir that well there. But so Rabbi Yossi was saying, this Rabbi Meir, he is an incredible gadol, Adam Kadosh, Adam Tsanua. He said that he's a great man, he's a holy man, he's a very modest man. Chadzman chama avelaya b'shubta ushalbon. And then once he happened to be in Zipori and Rabbi Meir, and he goes over to some avelim and he greets them. So Amrin Lei, so they said to Rabbi Chalafta, Ahon da'at misane shivche. He says, this is the man that you're singing his praises. So Amar Lon, so Rabbi Yossi said, like, why are you so, like, what happened? So Ma Iske, like, what did he do that you're so surprised that I praised him? Amrin Le, Chama Avelaya B'Shubto Sholbon. So they said, we saw that he went over to some Avelim on Shabbos and he greeted them. So Amar Lon, Ba'ayonatun Meida Mahu Chele. So you want to know what his greatness is? Bala Hodiachem She'ein Evel no Ein Evel B'Shabbos. He wanted to let you know that any Avelus that's public does not apply on Shabbos. And so therefore, what he was doing was completely normal. They thought, the Avelim, they're like lepers, you can't go near them even on Shabbos. And that's the greatness of Rebbe Meir, is that even though maybe people would think that this is a controversial thing to do, he went ahead and Dafka went over to greet the Avelim on Shabbos. Now, what is the source of Rebbe Meir's din that any public sign of Avelus is not permitted on Shabbos? Adahu dichsiv, because it's based on the following pasuk in Mishlei. Birkas Hashem hi ta'ashir. The blessing of the Lord, that will make a person wealthy. So what is the blessing of the Lord? Zu Birkas HaShabbos. The greatest blessing from Hashem is the Sabbath itself. It's good that we're learning this on Friday. We can have a Devar Torah at our Shabbos table. You can say, I learned in the Yerushalmi today that when Shlomo said that Birkas Hashem hi ta'ashir, that the blessing of God will make you wealthy, it's the blessing of Shabbos. And the pasuk continues and it says, V'lo Yosef etzev ima, and there cannot be any additional sadness accompanying it. This blessing has to be devoid of sadness, and because it's a complete blessing. Zo Avelus, that refers to Avelus. Kema detema, as we also know from another pasuk, Netzav Hamelech al Beno, that King David was sad, the same word etzev, ne'etzav, he was sad over his son. What is this referring to? When Avshalom tragically died in the course of the battle with King David, David was very distraught. He was inconsolable. And so that's how you know that sadness refers to mourning. Okay? And actually, in my drasha this Shabbos, I talk about Avshalom, because the Gemara says that Avshalom was a ben sorer umoreh. He was a wayward and rebellious child. Okay?
Right, it sounds like the greeting was Shalom Aleichem, even on Shabbos, as opposed to Shabbat Shalom or Good
All right.
Shabbos, no?
Yeah. Yeah, why didn't the Gemara say good Shabbos? Yeah.
Good
Good
Good.
Shabbos is
A
good.
good in
Or
Shabbos.
say the Shabbat Shalom, it doesn't say that they said that. It said they said Shalom Aleichem on Shabbat. Like, you know.
Well, it could be, first of all, maybe he said good Shabbos after he said Shalom Aleichem. Because you go over to someone you've never seen before,
What do you
he's,
say first? I always wonder who does say good Shabbos or Shalom Aleichem.
I don't think it matters. I don't know. I don't think it matters, but I could be mistaken. Maybe there is a protocol that I'm not familiar with.
Shabbos is better.
I'm not familiar. Okay. So now, so that concludes that Gemara discussing Rabban Gamliel's Avelus. I'm going to try, I really do want to try to find out what the standard halacha is. I can't seem to remember it offhand. But let's now take a look at the next Mishnah.
Just
Yeah.
to include, so if we're in shul here, and we see the water, what is the proper protocol?
The proper protocol, I believe, is to just treat him like any other person. Just to treat him like any other person. You don't have to make,
How you say good Shabbos.
you don't have to make a point of going over to them to say good Shabbos, but you don't have to avoid them either.
I'm sure you'll say, I'm sorry, what I know, and all that stuff.
You could do
Okay.
that. Yeah, you can comfort the mourner on Shabbos.
Or you can.
That's a common misconception, by the way.
Hmm.
People are under the false conception that you're not supposed to comfort mourners on Shabbos. Yeah,
So you
but
can say Hamakom when you see them.
technically you can say hamakom. Yeah,
That's making them feel good. Because it's
yeah,
Shabbos, you're not.
yeah. I don't know whether you should feel compelled to say the full formula. Or you say, I'm really sorry for your loss, and
I don't know.
yeah.
I didn't know that, it's amazing, most people don't know that, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And when you say privately, you should be in Avelis on Shabbos, what would be an example of something private? Don't have Shabbos guests, don't go out, don't.
Well, right. I mean, doing things that are not recognizable. So going to, doing it. Well, first of all, any socializing is not permitted even beyond the Shiva, right? Any social situations a novel is not supposed to do.
That's for the year you're talking about?
It depends if it's for a parent or for another person. For a parent, it's for the whole year. But for a non-parent, sibling, a child, and so forth, and a spouse, it would be for 30 days. But the primary one is family intimacy, being intimate with your spouse.
The person should not be for Shabbos Kiddush? Or
And a mourner should not be attending Shabbos Kiddush.
what about Shalshuas with a large group of men?
That I think is okay because you're doing it to fulfill a mitzvah, and you're going primarily to fulfill the mitzvah and then to hear Divrei Torah. So I think an Avel is allowed to attend the Shalosh Shudas. A Kiddush is different because it's a purely social event.
But I was asking like during the year of your Avelis, so you're 6 months into your father or your mother, socializing, but you still have Avelis for the year. So how
Right.
far does that go? Is that a personal decision or?
No, it's not a personal decision. It's a halacha. You're not supposed to socialize
On Shabbos?
even on Shabbos.
Does that mean at your Shabbos table, how many people can be there?
So there's no rule of thumb, but what I tell people is you can have up to 2 couples at your Shabbos table when you're in Avelis. More than that, it becomes a social event.
Unless it's family, you can include.
Yeah, family is different, yeah. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the next Mishnah, continuing the story of Rabban Gamliel. Because really the way we got onto this is we were talking about Rabban Gamliel who bathed during his Avelis, and he said, because I'm an istinus, I'm a fastidious person, which really applies to everyone today. Ucheshemes Tavi Avdo. Now another story about Rabban Gamliel. When his servant, his manservant, Tavi. Now, has anyone ever heard any stories about Tavi? Tavi was like Toby from Roots. Yeah.
Run.
But he was, if you remember Roots, kids. Okay. Kunta Kinte. So Tavi was Rabbi Gamliel's manservant, but he was different from the standard Canaanite slave. He was a righteous man. He was a Talmud Chacham, but he never ended up converting because in order for a manservant to convert, his master has to free him. And then through the process of emancipation, he goes through simultaneous with that, the conversion process. When you free your Canaanite slave, he becomes Jewish. Okay, so for whatever reason, Rabbi Gamliel never freed his servant Tavi, but Tavi used to sit under the table to listen to Divrei Torah and to listen to Shir when Rabbi Gamliel would be giving over Torah. So Tavi himself, and we'll learn a little bit about that hopefully in the Gemara, Rabbi Gamliel had a very deep and close relationship and a great admiration for his servant Tavi. So when Tavi passed away, Kibel alav tanchumen. That Rabbi Gamliel, as they were coming back from the burial, they would form what's called a shura, a line, which was a group, 2 rows of people that stand as the mourners coming back from the burial. You've probably seen this if you've gone to a funeral. And everyone says, Hamakom Yenachem Eschem, may God comfort you among the other mourners of Zion in Jerusalem.
Jewish cemetery was buried?
We don't know where he was. It doesn't say where he was. It could be they buried him in a Jewish cemetery. We have no indication from the story. But what we do know is Rabbi Gamliel was there, and he organized this and instructed people to say, to offer him nicham avelim for the loss of his servant. So Amru, lo limadatanu rabbeinu she'ein mekablin tanchumin ala avadim. So they said, Rebbe, didn't you once teach us that a servant is not a relative? You don't accept consolation like you would for a relative, for a servant. So Amar Lahem, Ein Tavi Avdi Kishar Avadim Kasher Haya. He says, my servant Tavi was unlike all other servants. He was a very proper person, and therefore I felt like he was part of my family. So, there are exceptional situations. So the Gemara now says,
Someone's a servant cannot be Megayah?
no,
No,
he can be Megayer. First of all, he's chayiv in mitzvahs aseh shahazman grama. Shalo hazman grama. He has the same scope of commandments as a woman does, an Eved Kanani. Once you acquire an Eved Kanani, a Canaanite slave, meaning a non-Jewish slave, which does not, okay, let's clarify, does not apply today. Those laws do not apply today. No one can say, I learned in the Yerushalmi that you can have slaves, so I'm gonna propose to my Filipino man at the bayit that he should become my Canaanite slave. I'll pay him $10,000 and he becomes my indentured servant for the rest of his life. No, that does not apply today. And if you did that, they'll throw you in jail and I will not come to bail you out. Okay. But the Torah does give an allowance for slavery when slavery was a socially accepted norm. Okay. A lot of people ask this question: how can the Bible be so progressive and come from God if it allows slavery? Right? And the answer is because God did not institute slavery. Man instituted slavery. In the ancient world, people exploited each other. What the Torah did, however, was that it curbed the exploitation of a slave by placing restrictions on how you treat your slave. But the Torah did not institute a policy that at the time was impractical. It would have been impractical to demand of Bnei Yisrael to abolish slavery simply because it was such a socially accepted norm. It would be like saying today, from now on, no one can own property. No one can own real estate. What are you talking about? No one can own real estate. Or like telling Americans no one can own guns. Try to do that and they will, they will shoot you. They'll shoot you, right? So that's the thing. That's why the Torah didn't ban slavery, but the Torah said, when you acquire a slave, if you do acquire a slave, these are the restrictions, and this is how you have to comport yourself with your slaves. So the ancient world, even in Rabbi Gamliel's time, which was even post Second Temple era, slavery was still in the first or second centuries of the Common Era. Slavery was still a thing, and so anyway, so how did I get onto this time? So we were talking about Tavi, and Rabbi Gamliel was saying he was a kosher, he was a proper person. So the Gemara now says that this question why he accepted. It's interesting that they questioned why did you accept consolation for Tavi, your servant, but they didn't ask the question, Rebbe, Tavi is not your relative. Like, what if he wasn't your servant, but he was your best friend? Would they still have had the question? Or was it only a question because he was a slave? So, b'nei chorim acherim v'kalbim tamchunim aleihem. Does that imply that if another non-relative, they wouldn't have been surprised that Rabbi Gamliel accepted consolation? He says, kine masnaya, that seems to be the way to understand the Mishnah. Ein mekablim tanchumin al ha'avadim, that you only are not supposed to accept consolation for servants, but that seems to imply that if it was a non-relative who wasn't a servant, it would be okay to turn yourself into an avel. He says that seems a Tane, he says, so we have a brisa that seems to say that you don't accept tanchumin for anyone who's not a relative. Ma'isa shemesa shivchaso shel Rabbi Eliezer. There was once a story of the handmaiden. In other words, this is the non-Jewish slave. She's a female slave of Rabbi Eliezer. She passed away, and v'nichnasu talmidav l'nachama, and the students came in to offer consolation to Rabbi Eliezer. V'lo kibel, but he basically withdrew from them, that he didn't want to accept their consolations. Nichnas mipneihem l'chatzer. So he basically, when they came in and he saw what they were trying to do, he circled out into the courtyard so that he could slip away. V'nichnasu acharav. They started to follow him. Labayis v'nichnasu acharav, and then they went out into the courtyard, and he circled back into the house. But when Rabbi Eliezer saw that they kept following him, Amar lahen ki meduma hayisi yisha'atem nichvim b'poshrim. I thought that you would be able to feel the scalding heat from lukewarm water. This is a parable. What he's telling them is, I thought that you would understand that by my sort of trying to move away from you, you would understand that I'm not accepting consolation for the death of my maidservant. But the fact that you keep following me and you couldn't take a hint means that you don't get burned even with hot water. In other words, when you want to tell someone, like even when you tell, like, what do? We play hot and cold, getting warmer. So like when you want to hint to someone and you want to say that they're clueless, you say you're cold. And when you're getting closer, you're really hot. Well, the same thing in this parable, what he was basically trying to tell them, like he was saying, I thought you could take a small hint. You can't even take a big hint. So he said, I thought you could get scalded in cold water. You don't even get scalded in hot water. That's the way he's saying that. Like you guys just don't, you guys are clueless. You don't get it. V'halo omru ein mekablim tanchumim al havadim. Don't you know that the rabbis taught that we don't accept consolation for servants? Mipnei shahavadim kibehema. He says, because slaves are like animals, meaning not that they're dumb like animals, but rather they're considered chattel. They're considered to be your livestock possessions no different from animals in the sense that they don't have the same familial connection. And I'll go even further, and I'll say,
Strong of a word to say behemoth.
yeah, it is pretty strong. Yeah, it's
You
not
could have said,
it's not politically correct,
No.
for sure not. And furthermore, he says, Im al b'nei chorim acherim ein mekablin tanchumin kol shekeno al avodim. And furthermore, there's an even stronger reason not to accept consolation for servants, because we don't even accept consolation. We don't act as a mourner for people who are not our relatives, even if they're not slaves. So surely we don't accept consolation for people who are our slaves. Misha meis avdo behemto omerlo hamakom yimalech chesronecha. But rather, the only thing that you can say to someone who has lost a servant is you can say, may the omnipresent one fill in your loss. Meaning not comfort you, not to declare you to be, not give you consolation among the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, but rather may God make up your loss. Your loss meaning your financial loss. In other words, you lost a valuable servant as someone who was there to serve you and to provide for you and to take care of you. And may God make up that loss. You know, sometimes you lose a good housekeeper. It really is a tremendous loss. Yeah. You can lose a good worker, a good housekeeper, and sometimes it could really be yeah. Okay. So you see from this brisa that not only do we not accept consolation for servants, we don't accept consolations for any non-relative, even if they're not a servant. And therefore, the Gemara is really just strengthening the question. The kasha, like I'm reading from the commentary, Madua Eifo Talmidei Rabbi Gamliel Tamu Rak al Shekibel Tanchumen al Eved Velo Tamu al Shekibel Tanchumen al Mishenu Karu. Why were they then only surprised that he was accepting consolation for Tavi because he was a servant? They should have asked a more general question, an overarching question, which is, why are you accepting consolation for someone who's not your relative? So the Gemara now brings a story that will hopefully answer this question. Kad demach Rabbi Chia bar Ada bar Achte de bar Kapara, that when Rabbi Chia bar Ada, who was the nephew of Bar Kapara, when he passed away, Kabil Reish Lakish Iloye Dahava Rabbe. Reish Lakish accepted consolation and made himself like a mourner because it was his Rebbe, even though they were not related. And Nema, we see from this story, the Talmidim Devar Nasha Chaviv Alei Kibrei, that we see that when a student passes away, it is as precious to him as a child. In other words, Reish Lakish was the Rebbe of Rebbe Chia bar Ada. He was Rebbe Chia bar Ada's Rebbe. So when his student passed away, Reish Lakish comported himself like a mourner. Why? Because a student is considered to be like a son. And what do we see? So the commentary reads as follows: V'hinei mimaisa ze muchach sherav rashai lekabel tanchumim al talmido me'atam shechashiv lo kibeno. We see that a Rebbe can accept consolation for the loss of a student, just like it was his own son. And that's the type of relationship that is supposed to be formed between a Rebbe and a student. Rabbi Gamliel Sover Shalab Davka Talmido Mamish Elohu Adin Kol Misha Masur Lo V'Nechshav Lo Kibeno Shevashai Lekabel Olav Tanchumin. Rabbi Gamliel felt that even if he's not formally your student, but it's someone that is under your care, someone who is that is under your tutelage for anything, is considered to be like your son. Lefichach Talmidei Rabbi Gamliel Lo Tamu Al Etzem Ha'uvda Rabbi Gamliel Kibel Tanchumin Al Misha Eno Krovo, and therefore the students were not surprised that Rabbi Gamliel was accepting consolation for Tavi in the sense that he was under Rabbi Gamliel's tutelage. Elatanu klapav rak shemikol makom en lekabel tanchumin al eved mishum shu chashuv kibehema. And their only argument was, but Rebbe, he was a servant. We could understand if he was a free man and he lived with you and he learned under you, that you would consider him like a son and you would accept consolation for him. But he was a servant, and so you don't accept consolation for servants. But Tavi's different. Tavi, Rabbi Gamliel said, is totally different from all other servants. We'll have to hold it here for today. Let me wish you all a good Shabbos. Don't forget to say over the Vort from the Pasuk in Mishlei, that Shabbos, what's the Pasuk in Mishlei that we learned again? Anyone want to quote it for us? Birkas Hashem hi ta'ashir. Yeah, the blessing of God will make a person wealthy. There you go. Okay, have a good Shabbos.
Today.